Live on Times Radio. I'm John Pienaar. It's good to have your company. It's a story, surely guaranteed to make you stop and wonder, did I hear that correctly? A Conservative MP is said to have been spotted watching porn on his mobile phone while sitting in the House of Commons, on the floor of the House. And it happened more than once. Now, the hunt's on to discover the culprit. And surely you don't have to be a prude to feel the MP wouldn't be there if he'd mentioned his viewing habits during working hours in his election manifesto. Apparently, Tory women MPs have been exchanging hair-raising stories, and lots of them. So just how bad is the sexist and misogynist and just plain inappropriate behaviour at the mother of parliaments? We'll be asking. Now, you've been having your say on this in the comments section of the Times Online from Sue Liddington. She says, I should be very surprised if the constituents of MPs who watch porn when attending debates would be happy with that. Watching porn can in no way be seen as doing the job for which they were elected. Difficult to disagree. And someone else says, in any other walk of life, a person caught watching objectionable material would be immediately suspended pending investigation. How is it MPs are so untouchable? And Pamela White, this is what she thought. Funny old world, really. I experience huge difficulty logging on to my own bank account. A new barrier is devised every time. Porn sites in the House of Commons, though, no problem, it seems. Well, tell me what you're thinking. 87222. Start with the word Times and get it off your chest. Or you can email my producer, Sandra, on studio@times.radio, or send us a tweet using the handle @TimesRadio, or to me @JPOnPolitics. Now, sending thousands of elderly people to die with COVID in care homes wasn't just wrong, it was illegal. And I'm going to be looking at that damning verdict in the High Court that came earlier today. I'm also going to be talking live to the American ambassador to Britain. And with Russia now threatening to strike at NATO countries, there's an awful lot to talk about. First thing, to those claims a male Conservative MP watched porn on his mobile phone in the chamber at Westminster. Female Conservative MPs shared their experiences of sexism and misogyny at a meeting last night. And the Conservative Party's chief whip, Chris Heaton-Harris, says he's investigating those claims and he called such behaviour wholly unacceptable. Now, sexist attitudes in Parliament have been in the spotlight all week after a Mail on Sunday story about Angela Rayner, Labour's deputy leader, that was dismissed as misogynistic and classist, with an unnamed source claiming the Labour MP had been trying to distract the PM in Parliament by crossing and uncrossing her legs. The Sunday Times, too, reported last weekend that 56 MPs are facing allegations of sexual misconduct. The issue of the treatment of women in Westminster, the misogyny, the harassment, was raised a number of times in the Commons earlier today at the Prime Minister's question time. Here's the Labour leader, Keir Starmer.
But I hope he's also sent a clear message that there's no place for sexism and misogyny or looking down on people because of where they come from in his party, in this House, or in modern Britain.
Boris Johnson said there was no place for such behaviour.
Mr. Speaker, well, let me first of all say, in response to what the right honourable gentleman has said about sexism and misogyny, that I exchanged messages with the right honourable lady over the weekend, and I repeat what I said to her. There can be absolutely no place for such behaviour or such expression in this House, and we should treat each other, Mr. Speaker, frankly, with the respect that each other deserves.
And the PM was also challenged by the Green Party MP, Caroline Lucas.
56 members of this House are under investigation for sexual misconduct, and that includes 3 of his cabinet ministers. The Prime Minister has just rightly said that there can be no place for sexism and misogyny in this House. So can he now confirm whether he considers that sexual harassment, apparently unlike bullying and lying, is grounds for dismissal under the Ministerial Code?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, sexual harassment is intolerable, and it's quite right that members should now have a procedure by which they can bring that to the attention of the House authorities. And I think that's a good thing. And of course, it's grounds for dismissal.
So that was in the House earlier on, and here at Times Radio, Mariella Frostrop asked the Conservative MP Damien Collins whether there was a problem of widespread sexual misconduct in the Conservative Parliamentary Party.
Of course, it is. It is bad for the reputation of Parliament, not just the personal reputation of the people who are involved in doing this. I mean, the other investigations that are going on, we're not aware of who is being investigated. That is extremely serious matter, but is is currently in hand with the authorities. This other issue that's come out today is very serious as well. But you're right. Some people outside of Parliament will rightly say, well, is there a cultural problem here? These things shouldn't be happening in Parliament, and I think we should rightly expect high standards of people who are elected to this House.
The Conservative MP Damien Collins, Lucy Fisher, our chief political commentators, here with me. Let's just start with this story, Lucy. It's got blinkability. It makes your jaw drop. A Conservative MP sitting in the House of Commons watching porn. Just give us a bit of the background to this.
Well, this is a claim made by two female MPs last night at a meeting of the 2022 committee. That's the female caucus in the Conservative Party. I think they swapped notes afterwards, is my understanding, and realised they were talking about the same male Conservative MP who is alleged to have been watching pornography on their mobile phone in the Commons chamber and also at committee meetings. The identity of that MP hasn't been made clear. There was some reporting earlier that it might be a frontbencher. My understanding is that's not substantiated either. But it was the cherry on the cake at a very febrile meeting last night at which the chief whip, the party chairman and the Commons leader turned up, three men, to hear from women. One female Conservative MP present told me they suspected that trio thought that they could merely come along and placate people after what's been a difficult week for the party with the Angela Rayner Basic Instinct story. And of course, that report about three cabinet ministers being investigated for sexual misconduct. Instead, Oliver Dowden, Mark Spencer and Chris Heaton-Harris were hit with a wave of women sharing experiences that I was told were disgusting and deeply sexist, including sexually lewd comments about the way women dress and other unacceptable remarks that they've had to put up with.
And I know you've been talking to members of Parliament. They didn't, in many cases, seem to want their names attached to their comments, but you can tell us the flavour of what they were saying in just a moment. But as far as this, the porn-watching MP, two sources, two MPs saw him doing this, so pretty compelling evidence, and there will presumably be consequences. Will we find out who this is?
Well, I'm surprised in a way that the identity of the culprit, who appears to be a serial offender, because I believe the two examples given by the two different women were not the same occasion, that hasn't come out yet. I find it difficult to believe that will stay under wraps for too much longer. Chris Heaton-Harris, the new-ish chief whip, has vowed to take action against this person. They said that they will be investigating. It's interesting, though. MPs I've spoken to today feel that it's such a bizarre story that in a way it slightly distracts from the wider cultural issue, things that are far more common and pernicious and damage female participation in politics at the highest level, which they want to see dealt with as well.
And in the background, we have reported just this weekend 56 accusations. We don't know what the accusations are. We don't know to what extent they are going to be verified or backed up by hard evidence, but 56 accusations, which is a lot. And you have this coming in on top of all of that. You've been talking then about what do you call it, the climate at Westminster with members of Parliament. Just tell me, what sort of things are they saying?
Well, the patience is wearing very thin among female MPs, and I must say that many Conservative women think that the problem is worse in the Conservative Party, and one said they thought that it was worse under Boris Johnson than it had been under Theresa May. In fact, I think they made an oblique reference to Partygate by saying, look, this is a party now where people don't pay any penalties for bad, even illegal behaviour. So the women I spoke to and asking people, come on to Times Radio, tell us your stories, tell us what you hear or what it's like in Westminster. They don't want to distract from the important policy issues they're campaigning on or the areas where they're fighting for their constituents. They don't want to get a name or become known for speaking out about this sort of thing. And the MP who told me that the things were getting worse under Boris Johnson also claimed that they felt the operation of the party, when it tries to address behavioural issues, when it tries to curb revolts, doubles down more heavily on women. It spins against them. It undermines them more than it does men. So that there's a widespread feeling of sexism that goes beyond just unacceptable comments, but to the sort of wider approach and attitude towards women undergoing the general business of politics.
Yeah, as long as I was at Westminster, and that's a very long time, it was said over and over again that the place could be compared to a kind of a gentleman's club, where not all the time people were behaving in a gentlemanly fashion. Now, sometimes you hear that that's less the case now. Still, it's not completely removed as a climate, as a culture.
Well, quite. And I was interested today in some of the male Conservative MPs I've spoken to have been among the most vociferous, saying that the whips know exactly who the main culprits are. There are a gaggle of MPs, men whose families don't live in London, so they tend to get together nightly almost, drinking, often on the terrace. They're known to often make inappropriate comments. So to me, it seemed there was a sense that they want the party to take action, and it's not a secret who some of the culprits of the wider behavioural issues are.
Yeah, is there a political fallout from all of this, Lucy? Because the accusations, as far as we understand, of misconduct, they do cross party lines. It's not all on one side of the House. Is it perceived that one side has more of a problem, as it were, politically than the other, because maybe the culture is slightly different? But I've heard over time these accusations levelled at both sides.
Well, that's right. And you mentioned that there are sexual misconduct allegations against 56 MPs at present. That's out of 650 MPs. Almost 1 in 13 is being investigated at the moment. It is certainly the case that allegations are spread across the House. And I think, as you say, Westminster is a very strange environment. It is like a private members' club. There is a late-night drinking culture, which I think people think is the source of a lot of the problems to do with this. And also it doesn't have modern HR.
Lucy Fisher, Chief Political Commentator, thank you. And now let's have a talk to Thangham Debonair, Labour's MP and shadow leader of the House of Commons. Thangham, hi.
Hi, I am walking to vote, so you may hear a bit of movement and background noise.
Okay, we can hear you loud and clear there, Thangham. Thanks for coming up.
Look, you're welcome.
Yeah, you're a member of the Shadow Cabinet. You're the shadow leader of the House of Commons. What would you do if a Labour MP was caught watching porn in the Commons?
Well, first of all, I do hope that would never happen. It's absolutely outrageous. It is actually against the Code of Conduct. The Parliamentary Code of Conduct for MPs says that we should not bring the House into disrepute, and Parliament into disrepute. I think this is. But also that we should treat our colleagues with respect. I think this isn't. I'm glad that the Tory Chief Whip is investigating. But I think also Labour participated with other parties in a cross-party good piece of work to set up the independent complaints and grievance system. And it may be that the Tory MPs who witness this might want to make use of that.
Right.
I do not think that we should be tolerating this sort of behaviour in the House of Commons. The Tory party also had an opportunity to vote for Labour's move to make misogyny a hate crime, which may not have covered this specific behaviour, but would at least have set a tone. Right. And that's part of our problem here.
But this specific case is the one. Yeah, but this specific case is the one that's grabbed people's attention in quite a big way. I know it's hypothetical. This MP seems to be a Conservative. What I asked you there was, what would you do on your side if it was a Labour MP watching porn in the House?
I would want to see them suspended. But at the moment, it isn't a Labour MP, it's a Tory MP. Yeah. And I'm glad that the Tory MP's being investigated, that the government chief whip has said they're going to investigate. I hope they get to the bottom of this quickly. Somebody obviously knows. And I do not see any place for anyone watching pornography in the House of Commons chamber.
So you see, you say not just suspended from the whip, which I take it that's what you meant.
Well, but should cease to be. That will be up to the government, the Labour chief whip.
So the whip should be removed, and it would be a case, do you reckon, going further then for a recall petition?
Well, I think we're jumping ahead here.
We are.
There's a process. There's a code of conduct. We have a standards committee that is there to investigate alleged breaches. We have a standards commissioner. And those are processes which currently operate. We also have the independent complaints and grievance system.
Okay.
So all of those processes could be used. I would absolutely know that our whips would support anybody who wished to make a complaint under those systems if they were the woman concerned. I hope that the government chief whip does likewise for the Tory MPs. And I don't think there is any... obviously, there are allegations which have to be answered. There are obviously witnesses to this because there are women who say that they've seen this. I don't doubt them for a minute. Why would they make it up? It's disgusting. But there is a process which we would have to go through.
Right.
It would be up to the chief whip to decide when and where.
So that's going to be up to the Conservative side of the House and their disciplinary procedures. Now, look, this is not a problem if we're talking about misogyny and lack of respect for women, because that's the subject today. It's not confined to the Conservative side of the House. It exists. It happens on both sides, doesn't it?
misogyny and sexism, which are two different things, but they are connected, exist in our wider society. So sadly, it shouldn't surprise us that we have some members of parliament from different parties who are guilty of one or the other or both, but they should have no place in politics. And I think our party, the Labour Party, which has been the party of equality from the start, we brought in most of the equalities legislation over the course of our history in government. We have a proud record on this. We wanted to bring in misogyny as a hate crime under this government. This government forced it down. These are the things that are part of Labour's DNA. Of course, that doesn't mean that there's nobody in the Labour Party. I mean, there's been someone in the recent past who has had to be removed. But we take action where we find out that somebody has sexually harassed someone else on the parliamentary estate or just in general. We do everything we can, everything in our power to take action.
Now, hang on. Let me ask you this. Just yesterday, there was a story. We spent a lot of time talking about it on this programme about the Angela Rayner, the deputy leader of your party, and the Mail on Sunday, which published, as many people now know, a story where unnamed Conservative MPs were quoted saying that she was distracting the Prime Minister by crossing and uncrossing her legs. And there was a storm of criticism about that. They were accused of inappropriate behaviour. The Speaker called it offensive. He didn't just call it offensive, though. He called in the editor of the paper sitting in the chair of the House of Commons. Did he overreach in doing that? He's been criticised by the Prime Minister in gentle terms, but the Prime Minister didn't agree with that. Do you agree with that? Is that for the Speaker to act in that way in the chair?
The Speaker has to do what the Speaker feels best to operate from the chair in order to keep an orderly House. I don't know what's in the Speaker's mind, but I think the Speaker has it within his power to decide what he feels he needs to do.
Well, clearly he does. I'm just asking your opinion of what he did do.
Yes, I know, and I'm really, really sorry to do this, but we are running quite late now, and I'm supposed to be doing another interview. So if I could just be really quick and say that I think that the Speaker acted within his powers. It's up to him. I think if the Daily Mail wants to refuse to meet with the Speaker, I think that's a lost opportunity to discuss how we tackle sexism in politics and sexism in public life and sexism in journalism. I think that it would behove the Daily Mail, the Sunday Mail, to talk to us, to talk to the Speaker, and to try and think about how we change the culture. I think it's not a good look just to refuse, but that is obviously a decision for them, and I think that we as a body, as a political body, have a lot of work to do in order to make sure that it is well known and well understood that this sort of sexism has no place in politics.
All right, I'll let you get on.
A way to go. I'm really sorry.
No, I get it. I'll let you get on and vote. Thank you, Debonair. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Now, coming up, does putting milk on your cereal make it healthier? We're going to talk about the Kellogg's opposition, the firm Kellogg's opposition to government plans to stop their cereals being prominently displayed in supermarkets because of their high sugar content. Time now is 4:23. I'm John Pienaar, and this is Drive on Times Radio.